Get ready to listen, learn, and earn CE hours. This podcast features content from an accredited CE activity provided by Calibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits.
What we want to see is thrivers, and those are two different things. So they're tired, they're burned out, they're leaving the profession, they're exhausted. Not just nurses, physicians, pharmacists, the list goes on. So that's why we've got to challenge those underlying beliefs that we have in healthcare that are just not working for us at all. And one of those is you can make decisions from above and push them down, and they're good decisions. When we've got to move to involving the people who do that work in the decision-making process, that is a fundamental assumption that needs to be put out there, and that changes our structures, that changes so much. That's how we'll get to a more resilient workplace.
Welcome back to part 3 of our podcast series on building your own credibility on and off the team with Kathy Scott and Bridget Sirikis. They are co-authors of Stupid Gone Viral. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And I am Leanna McGuire, your host for this podcast series. And today we're talking about risk, which could be a risky topic. But we're talking about risk and how it contributes to credibility on and off the team. So who would like to kick us off on this topic? It's a good one.
I'll give it a shot.
Give it a go.
All right. Yeah, risk. I mean, it's everywhere. I don't know if you've noticed. And we don't always see it until we're in it, unfortunately. But I think the last several years we've learned how risky the systems that we work in are. Well,
Yes.
those systems really failed us.
Yeah.
And created problems that were difficult to manage. But we also experienced a lot of risks in our personal lives over the last several years. So it's a really important topic for us to talk about today.
Okay. Reliability.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think risk is so important, but also how we react to that risk is equally as important. So should be an interesting conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So it sounds like a reliability issue when you're talking about the examples of the last couple of years and the system and how it didn't really support us through everything we went through. Can you elaborate on that reliability and how it contributes to credibility? I mean, I can assume based on what you've said.
Yeah. Well, just think about, reliability is getting the same results every time. That's what reliability is. And of course, you want those to be positive results every time. And I think what we have been experiencing is we keep doing the same things over and over and are not getting the same results. And yet we continue to do that because it's more comfortable. Human beings are pretty risk averse. And so we tend to err on the side of doing what we've always done. And it takes us a long time often to recognize, I got to stop doing that. But that means you have to start addressing those risks that have, reared their head in the system that you work in. And that means you have to change your behavior also. I mean, when you address risks and behave differently, it has a personal impact. And that's kind of tough to do.
It is.
Yeah, I think we've often seen, as Kathy mentioned, that we tend to revert back to whatever is status quo because it's so easy. It's what we knew for so long. And just going back there takes away a lot of anxiety. And we like to say the status is not quo. So if people could start thinking that way, it would be a lot better.
So as a leader, it's important to be adaptable, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, as a leader, as a employee, as a parent, as a anything.
Right. Good point.
Just think about the dinosaurs. They did not adapt fast enough. So we have, if we want to survive and actually thrive, we need to, one, be able to anticipate the risks out there and look for them. So that means we got to be aware. And then when they start coming at us, we have got to do something with them. So, how can we adapt our behavior or our systems to have a better outcome? And that requires being conscious about it and taking on some problems that might be really uncomfortable. So healthcare, let's talk about healthcare for a minute.
Let's.
Lots of risks in the system. And we often just keep our head down, looking at the short term without thinking about the longer term impact, and can get into all kinds of problems. And I do a lot of investigations of errors that harm patients and have so many examples there. But so for people to stop the line or speak up, those are taking on the risks and putting some risk on yourself. Can be tough.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be very tough. I think adapting, though, and changing, and the older we get, the harder that sometimes becomes for individuals. So I think, when you can do that in small ways to start adapting or changing your behaviors, you don't have to change overnight. It's impossible. Realizing that just those very small ways that you change behaviors or you adapt can be very helpful to a situation, and be willing to do that. Start small. It'll work. It'll be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Proactive. I was just thinking when you were saying about you see the risks coming and you start to develop a plan for that. So it's more proactive than reactive.
Yeah, that's the ideal. And in high
Sure.
reliability organizations that are consistent in their good outcomes, they're paying attention to day-to-day operations. They're paying attention to the risks in their midst. And when people bring them up, they're finding ways to address them quickly versus just let them, simmer below the surface. And too often, we normalize the bad behavior and we ignore it, the shortcuts that are going on, and we don't do anything about it until there's a really bad outcome. And then whack, the person who happened to be the unlucky one gets punished in some way. And that's no way to build your organization or a culture of where people are willing to take on the tough problems that we're facing today. So we have
Sure.
to counter that.
Yeah, I think you also see that, even beyond healthcare, you see that in the accounting and finance areas. You see that in the news almost every day. Someone starts out something small in an organization and defrauding the organization. And then before you know it, it becomes huge. And then, you've got an Enron or, many of the famous cases that are out there. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So we're not talking adapting in illegal or negative ways, which is what Bridget was just talking about and what I was talking about. We adapt, we do a workaround. We're going for a better incentive. We take shortcuts and then we get in trouble. We're talking about adapting so that we can be more resilient, which means we end up being in a stronger, better place. And those are two different outcomes that we're looking at here.
Sure.
Well, I think one of the important things there that is critical to that is the learning component, because in there, as we're adapting, as we're changing, there will be failures. There'll be some kind of misstep along the way. And as leaders, it's really important to help our staff learn from that. And I think that when you can experience that learning component and not be punished for that failure, that can go a long way to helping you enhance your risk appetite.
Sure. Good point. I was thinking of, and this may be a bad example, and it's certainly on a larger scale than just with a team, but I was thinking in terms of the nursing shortage. I mean, 20, 25 years ago, there was just a lot of talk about if we don't do something in 20 years, we're going to have a nursing shortage.
Wow. Yes. So I've been
Right?
in Yes. So I've been in nursing for more than 40 years. And we've been experiencing these nursing
Uh-huh.
shortages. And quite frankly, we have kept doing the same old things.
I know.
So it's really, yeah, that is a great example of not adapting in ways that are going to make us stronger in the future, at least not enough. So there's a lot of work going on in that area again. Personally, I'm working on a grant, large grant, to increase the pipeline of nurses in my state. And we're really wanting to do it in a way that doesn't get the same results, 5 and 10 years from now. So we'll
Right.
see. But taking on those risks, even as we're having conversations, we're saying, well, no, but that's kind of hard to do. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But it's
Right.
something we really need to get intentional about and adapt in ways that move us to a stronger position. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's making those positive adjustments along the way shows a level of resilience, right?
Yeah, and
Sure does.
resilience comes when you've really been in an adverse situation or really challenging times. And then, that's when we get a little bit better at experimenting and trying new ways and start questioning those beliefs that we had that no
Uh,
longer hold true. We
uh-huh.
hold on to those way past the point of when we should give them up. But when we're in a crisis, we can usually acknowledge, okay, that belief, that assumption is no longer valid at all. We got to get rid of it, replace it with something else. And when we're able to do that, that's when we can move to a more resilient state through adaptation that we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Sure.
But it's hard work.
Yeah, it's a very hard work. And I think probably nursing is one of those areas too where they probably think that they're over resilient. They've heard that word a lot. We've built our resilience. We're so resilient. What more do you want us to
Uh-huh.
do? But I think the key there is getting back to that adapting, changing, taking risks, experimenting. Be okay with some failures along the way, but taking those risks also allows you to become more resilient.
Yeah, and I would say our nurses are not, for the most part, more resilient. They're amazing, and they have survived. I would call them survivors.
Yeah.
And what we want to see is thrivers, and those are two different things. So they're tired, they're burned out, they're leaving the profession, they're exhausted. Not just nurses, physicians, pharmacists, the list goes on. So that's why we've got to challenge those underlying beliefs that we have in healthcare that are just not working for us at all. And one of those is you can make decisions from above and push them down, and they're good decisions. When we've got to move to involving the people who do that work in the decision-making process, that is a fundamental assumption that needs to be put out there. And that changes our structures, that changes so much. That's how we'll get to a more resilient workplace.
I think that's like almost like a mic drop
Oh,
there.
that was perfect. Good point. I think that we're as a profession, very resilient. I think we're strong, but I think we're really good in a crisis. But what I'm hearing is what we need to be able to see things coming and make changes before it becomes a crisis. It's like a nursing intervention. Or if you see somebody with extremely high blood pressure, are you going to walk away until they code? No. So I think, because most nurses I've worked with, majority are really good in crisis, but, and I'm thinking
Absolutely.
patient care, but on a larger scale, ideally, we don't want to get to crisis mode, is kind of what I'm hearing here. And I can see how that builds credibility if you're willing to do those things. How could it not, right?
Yeah, but that's a
Totally.
reactive mode. So we're reacting to the
Right.
crisis. React.
Exactly.
And, holding it all together in very impressive ways, where we need to move to, like, now that we're out of the pandemic, there's still a lot of bad going on, but we should be looking at, and I'm not seeing a lot of organizations do this, but what did we learn from this? And so now, how do we adapt our current structures, and our current processes, our current incentives, our current standards in healthy ways that will make it easier for people to do the right thing in the workplace? And a lot of people they're tired, so they've just returned to whatever was going on before with very little adaptation. And that is deeply disturbing, because there will be another crisis.
Sure.
And in the meantime, people are still working hard and reacting.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Not a good place.
Yes. So hypothetically, if I was in that situation, I don't work at the bedside currently, but if I was still at the bedside and someone came to me and said, we're going to put these measures we're taking a look at the situation, we're trying to learn the most from it and adapt so that we're prepared for the next time, that would definitely build credibility in my eyes, as opposed to, let's go back to business as normal until, right? That's what we're talking about here, basically.
For sure.
Excellent.
For sure. And I'll give you an example of someone I'm coaching who is a supervisor, and her one-up came to her and said, you've got too much staff. You got to send the staff home. And she had one extra person for 4 hours. And she said, are you looking in the waiting room? This is ER. Are you looking at the volume of patients we have? We have twice what we usually have. And she said, yeah, but you're budgeted to have this staff. So that is a perfect example of, we got to think here.
Yes.
When you have more patients, you need more staff. We need to be able to adapt our work processes to account for those. And same with how do you adapt when you don't have any patients there? So it's just, and what do you think it did to that supervisor? She was really mad.
No
she's
doubt.
trying to just keep it going. So the underlying assumptions of that budget are not adequate for this time or for that situation. So those need to be rethought.
Yeah. Good example.
Yeah.
Good example. So let's talk about, this is all a great conversation when you tie all three of the episodes in this series together. And we talked about biases and trust and risk, and building credibility. I think it's just such a great discussion to help people get more of an understanding. Can we talk a little bit in general about success in the workplace? Can we pull all that together? You're building credibility. Let's talk about that, and trying to move forward in our own professions. Definitely a connection between that credibility.
I'll take a step.
Please, yeah.
It starts with this. It starts with my mindset. Whether I'm at the point of service or manager or leader, and it really gets down to, am I willing to look at current state, observe it, see the risks, and learn new ways of doing business? That's really what we're talking about. And if I'm willing to actually admit what's going on and see it, and admit that there are problems, then we can start to experiment and get our arms around things. So it takes a mindset of curiosity, empathy, humility, asking questions, checking in, and then saying, I don't know the solution for this. Let's try to figure this out, and to put a structure around figuring it out so you can do that. That'd be a good start.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's so great to always keep in mind. I love the first one that you started out with, which was curiosity. That's a huge one for me. I mean, I know in anything that I'm learning, any crisis that I'm in, the curiosity component is so critical to my success and how I move forward. So I think that's important for everyone as they are building that credibility, that resilience, that trust. The curiosity factor is so critical to that.
Talk to me about an unhealthy mindset. What does that bring? Anything?
Wow.
Give me an example.
Yeah, an unhealthy mindset is we don't want to look bad. We got to hit this. We got to hit this number no matter what the cost. It's looking at short term, and it's like, I don't want to hear bad stuff. Let's keep moving forward. So it's called a fixed mindset. There's no room for being creative or trying. I'm a huge fan of small tests of change. They're really powerful. So
I like
the
that.
PDSA cycle, Plan and Do Study Act. So gotta leave enough slack in your system to allow for that kind of work to go on during these times, so we can learn and adapt and keep moving in a positive direction instead of the status quo. So I would say the opposite of a healthy mindset is, I'm closed. Here's what we have to do. Don't want to hear from you. Hit the number, hit the target, get her done.
Right.
It's not going to work in this day and age.
No. Good point. Good point.
Well, and that's so unhealthy. It just stifles creativity. It stifles problem solving. It stifles innovation. It stifles all that critical thinking that is so necessary. So that unhealthy mindset can almost be paralyzing.
Sure. Takes coins out of that credibility bank. Right? Absolutely.
Exactly.
So a healthy mindset is about perception, being aware of perceptions, maybe listening, paying attention to those assumptions. We talked about biases. It's all of those things that we've covered in the last 3 episodes of this series and how that contributes.
Yeah, and a willingness to take some risks.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Improve a situation. You got to be willing to do that in this day and age, and that makes you a bit vulnerable, and that's kind of scary and challenging. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's important to have some tools to do that kind of work.
And while you're building credibility with people on your team, you're also building credibility with other people within the organization. That's how that contributes to, helps with that too, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, because everyone talks. Right?
Everyone talks.
Everyone tells the story.
Yeah.
Hey, I just saw this occur. It goes like wildfire. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
It could work to your advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. It speaks to leadership. So that's really cool. Well, this has been a really informative and helpful series on building your own credibility on and off the team. And we have covered, again, talking about bias in the first episode, and trust and risk and success. It's been a really total of an hour of really great information. So I thank you again both for coming here as subject matter experts and having these great conversations with us. Thank you, Kathy Scott and Bridget Sarikas.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
And I'm Leanna McGuire, your host for this Elite Learning podcast by Calibri Healthcare.
This podcast featured content from an accredited CE activity provided by Calibri Healthcare. Visit elitelearning.com/podcasts for accreditation and disclosure statements and instructions on how you may be able to earn CE credits. Take your learning to the next level by subscribing to more podcasts on compelling healthcare topics.